Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts are not always created equal, and we have one man with a decided advantage in the number of fights that he's had, because Aleksei Oleinik started fighting before Matt was born. He started fighting in 1996. I mean, that's kind of between you and I, really, 94, 98. And he has 61 more pro fights than Chris Daukaus coming into this one. We have, of course, the Boa Constrictor, Aleksei Oleinik, taking on Chris Daukaus of No Fix nickname. And this is a guy, Matt, and Chris Daukaus, that we had our bones about him when he came into the UFC. I mean, he was a CFFC guy. We've seen a lot of CFFC guys have a lot of success, and gals. I mean, Caitlin Chukagian, Paul Felder, and the list goes on and on. I mean, you have Pat Sabatini making his debut here this weekend. He was a CFFC champ 2 times. But for Chris Daukaus, coming in here, he had that loss to Zhu and Yunwu, and I thought, ooh, well, it was a fight that he was winning in certain respects until he lost it. And then he beat Danny Holmes, who was 4-4, and then he fought Parker Porter. And he was supposed to take on Sean Teed twice before that, and that would have been a big rematch. Of course, that was Chris Daukaus' second pro loss, and Sean Teed was making his debut. There was a whole storyline around that. So Chris Daukaus comes into the UFC, and he fights Parker Porter, and he finishes him in the first round. Say what you will about Parker Porter, Chris Daukaus looked really good. And in that fight, Chris Daukaus weighed 241. Then he comes out and fights Rodrigo Nascimento. And I thought, well, for Rodrigo Nascimento, he's great at jiu-jitsu. He trains an American top team with some of the best heavyweights in the world. Sagano, that's one of them, among others. Chris Daukaus came in weighing 227 pounds, and it was like, holy smokes. Is this guy going to be like a light heavyweight his next time out? Physically, he looked really good. You can tell he's lost a lot of weight in his life, but physically, he looked really good. And he finishes him in the first round. Chris Daukaus has these wild hooks where there's like pop at the end of a shot and he flicks his wrist and it's amazing to watch this guy walk fighters down. So 2 huge wins for Chris Daukaus in the UFC. They put him on a main card against a guy that's main evented in his last 5 fights. He fought Alistair Overeem and lost. He fought Walt Harris and lost. He beat Maurice Green. He beat Fabrizio Verdum. Weird fight. And then he loses to Derek Lewis. But if anything, Aleksei Oleinik is consistent in the fact that he always fights the same.
Oh, 100%. Aleksei Oleinik loves to walk forward. And, okay, one of 2 things is going to happen. He's either going to walk forward and eat punches like there is no tomorrow, or he's going to walk forward, get his hands around you, take you down in the weirdest way possible, and choke you out in a way that you never thought was possible. Because that's something Aleksei Oleinik is well-versed in doing. Interesting fight, because Oleinik, you do look at some of the losses that he's had, and you know how to beat Aleksei Oleinik. If you have knockout power, you can beat Oleinik. The thing is, you have to knock him out before he can get his hands around you. And that is much easier said than done, because even if you do go back and look at the Derek Lewis fight, and I know we're going to talk about that performance a little bit later on, but look back at that fight, Oleinik has good success. He gets Lewis to the ground. He has him in kind of a submission, but just kind of the sheer size of Derek Lewis gets him out of it. But Oleinik, even in his losses, does tend to have pretty good moments in the fights. It'll be interesting for Daukaus, though. We talk about the black belt that he does have in jiu-jitsu. I would argue he is not even close to the level of grappling of a guy like Aleksei Oleinik, and I'm going to bring up a fight that might bring up some hard feelings for Craig, but Rodolfo Vieira, we say how he's the black belt hunter, how credentialed he is in jiu-jitsu. He doesn't have the MMA experience to really go along with his jiu-jitsu, whereas Aleksei Oleinik, I'm not worried about him getting tired in the first 10 seconds and then getting submitted by Chris Daukaus. Although Daukaus is a very good grappler, we just don't really see that side from him all the time. He's not going to submit Aleksei Oleinik at all. It's one of the few guarantees I can have for this fight. I do think Aleksei Oleinik's probably going to get cracked early and often because Oleinik himself isn't the biggest heavyweight in the world, and I do think size at a certain point will give Chris Daukaus issues. It's just this is the fight that's going to do it. If you do look, Curtis Blaydes, the guy in the main event, he's this massive, physically strong wrestler. Well, against Chris Daukaus, who Blaydes probably outweighs by like 40 pounds, Daukaus is going to have trouble with just that relentless attack of a guy like Blaydes. But against Oleinik, who tends to weigh in that sort of 230 to 245 range himself, he's not really going to be able to physically overpower Chris Daukaus.
And you'll see it up on the graphic. These guys weighed the same in their last fights. 227 for both. And I mean, Aleksei Oleinik, not the most physically imposing guy, but it's weird because, again, he had his pro debut in 1996, but he's a lighter heavyweight. And so you look at his body of work, he has a loss on his record to one of the greatest fighters of all time. He's had all the belts. He's had all the money.
Undefeated and undisputed.
He fought Chael Sonnen. How crazy is that? Like, Aleksei Oleinik used to fight at middleweight.
In Bulldog Outdoors.
Used to fight at middleweight. He's now a heavyweight and a highly credentialed heavyweight with almost 50 pro submission wins. And that's the crazy thing. And you look at his time in the UFC, it feels like he's been there forever. But he debuted in 2014 off a first-round submission win over Mirko Krokop. He's avenged losses to Guys like Jeff Munson, he has a win over Tony Lopez. And then again, you look at the fights in the UFC. He beats Freight Train Hamilton. He beats Jared Rosholt. He loses to Daniel Malanchuk. He beats Victor Pesta. He beats Travis Brown. Weird fight because he cracked Travis Brown to get him down. Loses to Razor Blaydes. That was a weird fight too.
He got his ear tickled.
He beat Junior Albini, which was, again, the Ezekiel choke. But that's the thing. Aleksei Oleinik, you saw it in the fight against Derek Lewis. He goes in for that Ezekiel, scarf hold, and then he almost would pull guard with it to really try and cinch on it. Didn't work from there. But he finishes Junior Albini. He finishes Mark Hunt, heavy hitter. Loses to Alistair Overeem in a gross fight. Loses to Walt Harris. Gets finished in the first 12 seconds. Beats Maurice Green because Maurice Green is a guy that gets tired. He's long, he's awkward. And then he beats Fabrizio Verdum by split decision in a fight that Verdum was coming off that long time away. Was it a suspension? It was a suspension.
It was a suspension.
We're talking PFL's Verdum. Verdum didn't even look like the same fighter that we knew before. But Aleksei Oleinik looked pretty good. I mean, his striking was all right. He was all right in the clinch. You knew the Muay Thai was going to cause him issues with Verdum, but it really didn't. And then he fought Derek Lewis his last time out. And this is the thing. Ranked fighter Overeem, ranked fighter Harris, ranked fighter Lewis. So he fights Lewis, and Lewis, again, main event. He's a 4th ranked heavyweight right now. Lewis goes ham early. He lands crushing blows. Oleinik kind of, he gets hurt, but he's old and he's a curmudgeon, and it kind of wakes him up. And then he gets Lewis into some big brother moments. And he's grabbing him and pulling him up, and he just gets into such weird things that we never see, let alone in MMA, but you never see it at heavyweight. And then the second round starts, and Lewis just gets on him and gets all over him and really just finishes him as he turtles up. So for Chris Daukaus, we know he has the grappling in his back pocket. We haven't seen it. We know that his striking is there, especially with the hooks. You saw it in the Nascimento fight. You saw it against Parker Porter too. He's good that when he pushes somebody, he doesn't tend to get cracked. His head's usually back a bit. And, we talk about it all the time. It's Cindy Danwa. Hands are always out there. Chris Daukaus is a way more refined version of that. His hands are out there.
Okay, but here, let's reserve the Cindy Dandois for only bad strikers. Chris Daukaus is a phenomenal boxer.
Really good boxer.
Yeah, and that's the really important thing. I would say the volume that he throws will just frustrate his opponent to the point where they can't hit him back. The problem for Oleinik, again, the way he's been able to fight so late in his career is he is the smaller guy. So even though he is a little bit older, the speed hasn't really left him because of the size disadvantage, if you will. The problem is he won't even have that one advantage in this fight. You're just an older version of Chris Daukaus. You're hittable at this stage in your career. And if Oleinik had better wrestling, it'd be a lot easier to pick him in this fight. But unfortunately, he doesn't have the way to get the fight to the ground. And that's why I'm so confident with Daukaus.
I don't have confidence in Chris Daukaus. I mean, it's more of I have less confidence in Aleksei Oleinik. But again, you look at the level of competition. He finishes Maurice Green, split decision win over Verdum, and then he loses to Derek Lewis in a fight where he had him in bad spots. But Derek Lewis has weird cardio and weird wrestling, and Lewis is able to get out of some of those spots. I don't know if Chris Daukaus is going to win this fight. Does it have to be by finish?
Yeah, Aleksei Oleinik's been it's not that hard. Okay, it's probably really hard to knock out Aleksei Oleinik, don't get me wrong. But for top-tier UFC heavyweights, they've been able to do it. And you say, yes, his losses have been to guys with numbers next to their name. I'm going to be honest. I think Chris Daukaus is just as good as Walt Harris. He just hasn't had as many fights to get himself into the top 15 yet. Chris Daukaus and Walt Harris stylistically are quite similar. It's just Walt Harris is a southpaw and Chris Daukaus is orthodox, but Daukaus can switch stances and has a really good ground game. So I know he isn't there yet, but I do see Chris Daukaus as being one of those guys like a Walt Harris who will be in the top 15 for years to come.
I think Chris Daukaus has a great shot. So, Matt, you've already written this off. We haven't even talked about the odds of the Tachi votes. So we look at the odds, Matt. Daukaus open a minus 140 favorite. He's now minus 180. If we look at Oleinik, open a plus 120. He's now at a plus 148 or thereabouts on best fight odds. Topology votes, 892 of them, 62% Oleinik. And this is where it gets hairy. 82% of those voters think Oleinik's going to win by submission. The 38% of voters that pick Daukaus to win, 87% by knockout. So, by definition, you would think there's going to be a finish in this one. So I'd want to see what the over-under is in this. I wouldn't go with just straight Daukaus or straight Oleinik. I'd want to see the props. And again, normally you get those further on during the week, not just on a Monday. If we have a look here right now, Matt, we do have some. So let's have a look. Fight goes the distance, minus 505 that it doesn't go the distance, plus 335. So again, the sites get it. There's probably going to be a finish in this one. Oleinik's taking on that top tier competition. And where it gets weird is you look at guys that have lost to the top tier and you'd have to say, okay, well, they're still in their physical prime, this and that. This guy started fighting in 96 and he's 43. You've got Chris Daukaus, 31, not as many miles on the tank. He's going to be at a reach disadvantage. He has a slight height advantage, and size-wise, they're going to be about the same. So for me, Oleinik's a tough guy to beat. Again, I like Daukaus in the fact that he has really, really credentialed, jiu-jitsu in his back pocket, but his hand speed's great. His boxing's great. Aleksei Oleinik's hard to go against, though.
He is, but at this stage of his career, it's really hard to say. Okay, Oleinik has fought the upper echelon. The only upper echelon guy he's really ever beat, though, is Mark Hunt. And Mark Hunt, at that stage of his career, he was 2 fights away. That was the fight before he had that fight with...
Willis.
Yeah, Justin Willis, and that was one of the worst fights in UFC history. But it was just kind of Mark Hunt who was done with the company. And I know that's... Listen, maybe we're giving Aleksei Oleinik too hard of a time, but that's his best win by far. Travis Brown, by the time he had beat him, was kind of washed. And then he's gotten all those opportunities against the upper echelon. I really don't think a win over Fabricio Verdun, over the Verdun, I should say, that we saw in that fight is good enough to beat Chris Daukaus. I think Daukaus is going to win this. He's probably going to win it by stoppage. And I'm just really excited because I think that we are getting 2 of the top heavyweight prospects on this card. I love the fact that they are fighting not back-to-back. There is that one kind of buffer in between those two with the Phil Haas-Nasty Imavov fight. But I really do think Daukaus and Aspinall are going to be 2 guys that we're going to see around in the top 15 for a very long time.
I like Daukaus a lot, don't get me wrong. But again, I have a tough time siding with him in this fight. Oleinik, you have to think, well, we're 59 wins in. We're almost 50 pro submission wins. You have to think that that's the number that he's looking for in this one, or to continue to get closer to it.
I don't think that's going to make him try harder, though, to win a fight.
No, but that's why he's sticking around. So I'm going to go with Aleksei Oleinik in this one. Again, the guy's tricky, and especially for Chris Daukaus, if he can walk Aleksei Oleinik down and crack him, we saw Derek Lewis do it, the 4th-ranked UFC heavyweight. I do think Daukaus has an incredible ceiling. Again, we talked about Bozer tonight. We talked about Tom Aspinall. We talked about Cyril Gahn. I think Chris Daukaus is up in there around the movers and shakers and the guys that are going to be around for a really long time. But I slightly edge Aleksei Oleinik, and we'll see what the week has. We'll see what we're thinking on Saturday with Fight Night Picks, Kicks, where we offer up our final picks for this card. So don't take everything in stone. We might have a change of heart as the week goes on, but I'm really looking forward to this fight, Matt. We're disagreeing on the pick. I'm going Oleinik. You're going with Chris Daukaus, but overall, it should be a great fight. We've got a great fight card headlined by Curtis Razor Blaydes taking on the man, the myth, the legend, the Black Beast, Derek Lewis. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say.
Let's get into it.